Press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from News Laundry.
We have with us today Rajat Gupta. If you've been living under a rock, let me introduce Rajat to you. He is from Modern School, Delhi, IIT Delhi, and then he went to Harvard Business School and graduated in 1971. And the same year, he was hired by McKinsey. He went on to become the managing director in 1994 and retired in 2003, after which he started work on his own. During his tenure, McKinsey opened 23 new offices across the world, and their revenue went up by 280%, up to $3.2 billion. In 2011, he was charged with insider trading. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison in 2014 and was released in January 2016. He has written a book, Mind Without Fear, which I suggest you do go out and read. And while I was reading it, there were so many questions that came up that I now have the opportunity to ask Rajat. Welcome to News Laundry, Rajat.
Thank you, Madhu. It's a privilege. I look forward to our session.
Rajat, you have been through a really rough time. Rough time in terms of the trial, the imprisonment, and then your attempt to come back and rebuild your career. When you write a book like this, you do expose yourself even more than you have been to all the intrusions that happened during your trial. Now you're exposing yourself to even more questions, even more intrusions. Why did you write the book?
Well, as I say in the book itself, it came out of an idea. One of my prison mates, he and I used to get together, often take walks and so on, and you generally exchange your life stories. That's what happens in prison. And he said, you have led a very interesting life. You should write a book about it. So I said, sure. I had no real intentions. But then he said, no, I'll help you. So we sat down together and he would work with me on an outline and so on. He was a catalyst in making sure. And then we dropped it after a while. And then Abhik Sarkar and Chiki Sarkar were visiting me in prison. And so they were asking me, what do I do? What I said, I read and write a fair amount. And they said, you should write a book. They're in the publishing business. So I said, if you publish it, I'll write it. I came out of prison, a year went by, and
you have a history with the Sarkar family.
I have a history with the Sarkar family. My father was
Chiki's grandfather was
colleague of my father's.
Yes.
And he used to own Andhra Pradesh Patrika at that time. My father was the editor in Andhra Pradesh Patrika. So a year after I came out, I got a call from Chiki saying, how is the progress on the book? I said, well, not really. She said, no, you must write it. And I resolved that I would write it. And
so you didn't write it in prison?
I started writing an outline in prison, is the best way to describe it. And then I picked it up after about a year, after I came out.
Did you meet any of these notorious or famous inmates, such as Madoff's brother?
Yes, I met Madoff's brother, who was in the same prison. They were, and I'm not going to remember the name, but
Luciano,
the famous
Gotti's right-hand man. Did you meet him?
Yes, I did meet him.
And the bomber, the Russian?
No, he was on a very tight security, cell of his own. No,
So what did Gotti's right-hand man tell you? Anything interesting?
And nothing interesting. I mean, he was... everybody knew who he was, and he had been there for a very long time. He was a relatively elderly gentleman by that time. Mm-hmm. And in a strange way, he was respected in prison for being a long-standing member of that place.
I did some research on the prison, and there are even websites that tell you how to survive your first week in prison at this Massachusetts place. I think it's Devon.
Devon's, yeah.
And frankly, I didn't find it too bad, considering the fact that you lose your freedom, and of course your isolation stints were pretty awful. So for that, I asked the viewers to read and find out what he went through and how he used the Gita to help you through it, the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. You've written in your book that you really didn't get a chance to tell your story. And at every given moment, when you could have spoken, you didn't. At the SEC hearing, your lawyers advised you to take the fifth. Now, taking the fifth by itself, in some sense, admits in one way that there is something you're guilty about, that you will not give testimony against yourself. Now, wasn't that strange advice when you at that moment had already professed your innocence? Why did you listen to your lawyers at that time?
Well, that was a time when not much was known, and this was not a hearing, by the way, it's not a hearing. They asked if they could interview me. And my lawyers said they haven't charged you, they haven't actually even issued a Wells notice. You are going to get a Wells notice and you have an opportunity to explain and give your side of the story. So you should not speak at this time, because we at that point we were completely in the dark. We had no idea what they were trying to accuse
But even then
me
you
of.
wrote in your book that you did want to.
I did want to. I said, listen, I have let them ask questions. I have nothing to hide. But they said, you don't know these people. They will use anything, any slip, because right now you don't know what they're even charging or what they have or what you're responding to. This was very early days. I didn't really know what was. So I said, okay, if that's your advice, professional advice, that's what we do. And what happened is immediately thereafter, they issued me a Wells notice, which is a notice saying, we are investigating you on these types of things, please explain. So we wrote a reply, which is, they give you customarily, I forget, 30 or 60 days, and we wrote a reply. The reply was due on a Friday evening, 5 o'clock. We sent it. On Monday, they charged me, which really implies that they
We're just waiting to.
They did not look at in depth what my reply was. They didn't investigate what my points were being made.
But you hadn't replied actually.
No, I replied fully to the
written.
To the Wells notice gives you, here's what we are investigating you about.
So your lawyers responded to that?
A detailed 60-page response on every point they asked about. Mm-hmm. So that was, and you're doing that, that's literally under oath, because you're doing that as a formal legal response. This actually vindicated my lawyers. He said, see, they didn't even actually consider your arguments. Mm. So if you had given them a free interview, they would have tried to trap you. And I thought maybe he's right, I don't know, because it was clearly obvious that, you submit a thing on Friday, on Monday they inform me they're going to charge me on Tuesday morning. So nobody has really looked at it.
Hours before the SEC filed a civil action against you, you sent an email to business associates, friends and partners, and I'll read it to you. You wrote, I am stunned and shocked by the proposed action. Let me assure you, I have done nothing wrong. The SEC's allegations are totally baseless. I'm informed by my lawyers that the case is based on speculation and unreliable third-hand hearsay. Just be clear, there are no tapes or any other direct evidence of my tipping Mr. Rajaratnam. Yet it turned out that there were recordings. Now, how could your lawyers have not known and informed you that they had recordings? Surely they should have known.
Just as you read it, read it carefully. There is no tape recordings of my tipping Rajaratnam on insider information. None at all. There is only one tape that exists, and we can go into a discussion about that tape. But just as you read it,
So it was not a direct insider's tip, you said?
There is no tip. There's not a tip. It is not that tape you're referring to. There was only one tape conversation. There were 7 tapes, actually. There were others were just call me back or something like that. There was one conversation that was taped. It had absolutely nothing to do with insider trading.
But when you told him what you discussed with the Goldman board, and you wrote in your book that that was a mistake.
Yes, but it's not insider tip. It was not an insider information. No trading happened as a result of that. So, there was no trading based on that. It was not confidential information. Goldman executives themselves had already talked about it in the marketplace, and we established that in the
But
trial.
you wrote in your book that that was a mistake.
A mistake is different from a crime.
Yeah.
Mistake is I should have never said it was a discussion at the Goldman board. That doesn't mean it was insider information. That doesn't mean it was anything criminal. That doesn't mean that I actually met any of the criteria of insider trading.
But if it was to be tried today, in today's law, it would still be considered criminal, because today's law says that even if you don't trade personally, if you get indirect benefit...
No. I think, Madhu, you're getting it completely off, because insider information is market-moving information. That information was already out in the market.
But they said...
No, hold on. It was already out in the market. See, they never even based the case. They would have, if that was the case, they would have charged Rajaratnam on Goldman. They never charged Rajaratnam on Goldman. Why would you think they would not charge him? Because that is not insider trading.
But there was one conversation that took place about the $2 share going down, the Goldman
share. It's not a conversation with me.
And well, after the conversation with you, according to the timings of the prosecution that they presented, they said that he went into the room and said, I've just heard somebody from the Goldman board.
No. I think
that
you're not,
a bank is being bought.
Madhu, I apologize, but you haven't quite got it right.
Okay.
There was a conversation, I had a long conversation with him the day before. The next day, he said, I heard from somebody in the Goldman board that Goldman is going to lose $2 a share. Mm-hmm. Okay? To a colleague of his.
Yes.
So he is I can go chapter and verse to you. First to say that the meeting the day before, the Goldman board meeting, was all about Goldman firing 10% of its staff. Mm-hmm. Okay? There was no financials discussed in that meeting. It was an extraordinary board meeting only to discuss that topic. The Goldman management was embarrassed because they did not tell the board that they were firing 10% of their staff, which is a matter they should have informed the board. They hurriedly, it was leaked in the Wall Street Journal. Headlines, Goldman's firing 10% of the staff. That was what was discussed. Rajaratnam, for whatever his reasons are, I don't know, made that statement. It's called hearsay. And, by the way, we looked into the records. $2 was not even the right figure.
But in your book, when you mention the conversation that you had with Rajaratnam, and you did mention the Goldman board, you wrote that
was
it was
in July.
In July, and you wrote that that was a mistake you made.
No,
you acknowledge it in your book.
No. I'm telling you, mistake is different from...
Yeah, so I'm just talking about mistake. I'm not saying that it's criminal.
But
you made the mistake.
Yes, but let's not confuse the July conversation with the October conversation.
No, we're just talking about the conversation in which you wrote in your book that you made, because we need to clarify this, that when you are saying that you made a mistake, I'm not saying it's criminal, but it was a mistake in the sense of it's unethical to discuss the board's discussions.
No. So it was a figure of, if you listen to that conversation, it was a figure of speech. I said this was a discussion at the board. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, when I say that, that means I should have not said it was a discussion at the board. Mm-hmm. And that is a mistake.
You said, he asked me casually about a rumor he'd heard that Goldman was considering buying a commercial bank, such as AIG or Wachovia. Wachovia. I confirmed the rumor, which was public knowledge, but made the terrible mistake of saying that there had been a discussion about it at the recent board meeting. I cringed to think about this being played in the courtroom. The information itself was hardly private. The press had been discussing the possible acquisition for weeks at that time, but I should never have mentioned the board meeting. Raj was always gathering information, throwing out things he'd learned from analysts and research firms and looking for confirmation. In this instance, I should have been more careful. I hoped people wouldn't infer from this slip that I made a habit of such disclosures, and I did not. But you do acknowledge that it was sort of a lapse, an unethical thing to do to say it.
Yeah, I do, yes. I mean, I say it's a mistake. I shouldn't have said it. It came out of my mouth. It was discussed at the board. But it was publicly available information. So
but the jury hears a recording like that.
That is the problem with the system. That the jury, they should have, firstly, think about it this way. They never charged Rajaratnam with Goldman insider trading. Okay? This particular tape had nothing to do with insider trading. There was no trading done after this call. So
he did, didn't
no.
he? He went in and said, "I just spoke to somebody from the board of Goldman."
You're mixing up conversations. That is in July. That was a conversation in September. So there was no.
But according to the prosecution, they timed this call with a trade that Rajaratnam made afterwards.
You're mistaken. You did not understand. There was no trading in July. Okay, this conversation was in July. This is the problem. This is the type of confusion that juries can get to. But just like you got confused, they can get similarly confused. But they should have ethically never actually, when they didn't charge Rajaratnam, in Rajaratnam's trial, they played this conversation. Okay, they should have never done it because they're just trying to basically try me in absentia and try me by innuendo, because this is not evidence. There was no trading after that. And it was not confidential market moving information.
Now, let's talk about the second phone call then that you said, that there was trading.
Yes, but it was not after my phone call. There's not even any evidence that I said anything, or even that I even talked to him.
They just presented the timing of the call.
Yeah, just the timing of the call.
And then he traded right after that.
He traded right after that.
So it was circumstantial evidence.
Absolutely.
So why did your lawyers not highlight that?
Of course they did. Of course they did. They said they tried to exclude that. The judge ruled against that. They said this is circumstantial and hearsay. Hearsay meaning that he is saying somebody to somebody else. They have no recording of mine telling Rajaratnam anything.
Mm-hmm. Now, the conversation that was also played in court was you're talking to Rajaratnam about Kumar, Anil Kumar, and who is still at that time employed by McKinsey. And Rajaratnam mentioned that he was giving Anil Kumar $1 million a year for literally doing nothing. And you replied, "I think you're being very generous. He should sometimes say thank you for that, Then Rajaratnam returned to the subject of his paying Kumar $1 million a year for about 4 or 5 years. The money was after taxes, offshore cash. And then the arrangement he'd made with his maid's account and offshore.
That came out all much later.
But the latter part of the conversation, which deals with Anil Kumar, Rajaratnam mentioned that he'd been paying $1 million to Anil Kumar. Was that the first time you got to know that Rajaratnam was paying Kumar? Or you said you tuned it out, or you didn't respond to him? Was it the first time you got to know that he was paying him?
I didn't know whether it was even true or not. Rajaratnam and Anil, as I said, were very good friends. I said that in the book. They often had discussions about Raj trying to hire him, he trying to make Raj a client, etc. Frankly, I didn't know whether this was true or not. In fact, what he says there in that tape, I paid him for many years, it's not even true. The amount is not true either. Later came out. This is all later information. I heard it. It may be true, it may not be true. And there was nothing particularly that will stick in my mind. 4 years later when I heard the tape, I didn't remember it at all.
But you wrote, and I quote, "So naturally hearing the tape, they assumed I'd known about and condoned this illegal arrangement." Do you mean the arrangement of a McKinsey partner taking money privately was illegal, or that you knew it was insider trading?
No. See, the way, if you look at it, so this happened in 2008, right, this conversation. In 2009, they were charged, and in I don't know what time, this information came out. Not this information, but the arrangement that Anil Kumar had with Raj came out when Anil pleaded guilty. Mm-hmm. So if you look at that information, which came out much later, 2 years later, you could assume that he was talking about that. About his arrangement with Anil.
Okay.
I was not knowledgeable about it. I had no idea. So I didn't even pay any attention to it. It has zero to do with anybody in McKinsey. It's not. There is no such policy. So I didn't even strike me. I mean, now in hindsight, because Anil and Raj had a quid pro quo and an arrangement, people say, I had no idea they had any arrangement.
But when he mentioned it, didn't it ring some kind of a alarm bell?
No, because Raj and Anil would keep talking about each other. The fact that he paid $1 million or not, I didn't know. And if he did, it wouldn't be a big surprise, because they were very good friends. And if Raj decided to pay Anil $1 million, he didn't say for what. He didn't say I was paying him for insider trading. He just said I gave him $1 million for virtually doing nothing, which means that he gave it as a gift.
Well, you at that time were and are still an ex-McKinsey managing director. And McKinsey's known very publicly for its values. It's on their website. You have a values day.
Sure.
Didn't it kind of maybe ring a slight sort of twinge in you, that didn't any kind of alertness happen in your brain when he mentioned that maybe you could have gone to McKinsey and told them that, look, I've heard this from Rajaratnam, let's speak to Anil Kumar and check why he's taking the money, for what he's taking the money. Maybe you could have gone to them and asked them let's talk to Anil about this.
I didn't think of any nefarious. I mean, this is a relationship between two friends, and somebody pays him $1 million. That's, I don't see what the issue there is. I wouldn't even think.
The question then is that when a person is working for McKinsey, if he's taking money from someone outside, especially a trader, wouldn't it raise a question in your head that this does not really match with McKinsey value? Like, even say, take a simple situation where in a journalist organization or in a hospital, we don't allow people to moonlight.
No. But let me just say, there is in McKinsey, you use charged word like moonlight. There is no policy against if Anil wanted to advise. Let's say forget about insider trading. Suppose he was advising Rajaratnam on how he built his organization, whatever he advised him. He said, I'll pay you $1 million. It's perfectly fine. Nothing against McKinsey policy. Zero.
But as I said...
No, just let me just be very clear. It is zero against McKinsey policy. And in fact, the government tried to bring that up, and the judge said, no, where is the policy? Show me. There is no policy. Many of our people work with their family companies or friends. They give them advice. They get paid. As long as it's not interfering with your McKinsey work, and as long as you're not creating a conflict, it's perfectly fine.
Well, there are two things. One, I did check the McKinsey website and their values, and yes, you're right, it's not spelt out. But then most organizations, including us, we don't spell it out. But if we got to know that somebody was moonlighting, we would find it unacceptable.
There are tens of, this is not right, what you're just saying. It is not a moonlight. What he does with his own free time, and if it's not conflicting with McKinsey, we don't really care. If he gets paid for it, we don't care. There are lots of people in McKinsey who have family companies, right? They receive income from them for giving them advice or giving them whatever.
But you, as I asked you earlier about this managing, one of your partners was made to resign from all leadership positions because he invested in his wife's company who's making seeds. She was a gardener and a writer.
You have to, I said that when you interviewed me. You have to look into the case properly.
Tell me.
It is about, firstly, this was way old case. It was it was Carter Bales. It became a public issue. There was I don't even remember the specifics of it. It has absolutely nothing to do with. He was perfectly within policy for doing. The fact is that he spoke in the press or something happened. That's what we not do. We don't encourage people to speak in the press. I'll have to go into and look at the whole case. But it had nothing to do with, any of what you're talking about.
But
there's no parallels.
McKinsey does have a policy, doesn't it, that it does not expect their partners to invest in an operating company.
No, there is no such policy. I mean, you have to educate yourself on McKinsey policies.
I've spoken to a couple of McKinsey people, and they have told me.
No, you cannot play an active management role that is different from investing in an operating company.
What I was told is that McKinsey partners are not supposed to invest in any operating companies.
They're incorrect. That's incorrect.
So were you investing in operating companies while you were managing director?
Of course, any investment you make is an operating company.
So outside of McKinsey, you were investing personally?
Everybody does that in McKinsey. I don't understand what you mean by that, because any company, suppose I invest in company X, that's an operating company. Mm-hmm. As long as I'm not running it, I'm not operating, I'm a passive investor.
So while you were managing director,
you can make passive investments.
You were making investments.
No, forget about my investment, but anybody can make passive investments.
But
I don't see what direction you're headed in this, because it's not.
No, I'm not heading in any direction.
No, but it's not. You keep harping on this question. I'm telling you that McKinsey has no bar against passive investments.
Well, we'll come back to this a little later. I want to ask you that when you met Rajaratnam in prison, and you told Raj, "I'm here because of you," and you also said he's not the apologizing type, so he didn't say, "I'm sorry," and you walked around with him. And then you said you forgave him. What did you forgive him for? Did you forgive him for cheating you out of $10 million, or for being the cause of being in there?
For the cause of being in there. That cheating him out of $10 million is a different question. It doesn't, it's a very complicated legal question, whether he had the legal right to take the money out or not. He had the legal right. He didn't give me my share at the same time, which he should have offered as a partnership. But
you forgave him for?
I forgave him for, he obviously the phone calls that he said something to his colleagues. He's a great exaggerator. We had established the culture in his place was a great, he is always showing off about. So he said, "Oh, somebody from the Goldman board told me that there was, they were going to lose $2 a share." Neither the $2 was right, nor was it discussed in the board. So what was he doing saying that? He was just trying to impress his colleague. I know somebody from the Goldman board.
But they traded with that information, didn't they?
They did, but it was very easy. That information there was no information, $2. It was not right. He just said something. When 10%...
It's $1.50.
Yeah, but that doesn't, nobody rounds up EPS like that. There's absolutely clear in those times that all the banks were doing poorly. This is October of 2008. When you see the headlines that morning that Goldman is hiring 10% of its staff, firing 10% of its staff, what would you conclude from it if you're an astute businessman? That they are in trouble, they're firing 10% of their staff. So I don't know what what decisions he uses to make his trading decisions, but if I were him in that time in October, I would clearly assume no banks are doing well and Goldman isn't doing well either.
Well, you forgave Rajaratnam,
yes,
also because he did not give any he refused to give testimony against anyone. You were Anil Kumar's mentor. You stayed in touch with Kumar even after his arrest. He stayed at your place in Manhattan. Yet he testified against you even though he had no actual dealings with you related to the charges filed against you. He had nothing to do with the case in court with you. And yet he came and gave testimony against you.
Right.
Would you forgive him?
Yes, I have.
Why?
Because it's plea bargaining, which means that basically I plead guilty, I plea for a reduced sentence in exchange for testifying against other people. This is a fundamentally flawed system to begin with, and it's something that needs to get reformed. What you're telling somebody is, when you do that, you're selling your soul to the prosecutor. He will force you to do all kinds of things, but you're tempted because you don't want to go to jail. I know in prison of so many people who fingered a lot of other people because they took a plea bargain. It's a bad system, okay? So, Anil was forced to do that.
He wasn't forced to do it, he chose to do it.
No, he chose to plea bargain, but he was forced to testify against.
No, he wasn't forced, he chose to do it. He
No.
could have said no.
No, he could not have said no. That's the part about selling your soul. In exchange, what you sign is, I will testify whoever you ask me to, and whatever unsaid is whatever you ask me to say. That is unsaid, but basically it's called a cooperation agreement. So, listen, I mean, was I very disappointed that Anil did testify against me? Absolutely. If I were in his shoes, I would have never done that. Never. And I respect Raj for that, because he did not do that. He did not take a plea bargain when 5 years off was offered to him. So in that sense, Anil had no spine, Raj did.
So I make a case of you not forgiving him. When Anil was lying about the date of when you discovered the losses in Voyager, that was seriously damaging to you. How did your lawyers allow him to get away with this? At least the issue of perjury should have come up.
No, he didn't say. See, they do play very subtle tricks. He didn't say that what the Voyager of discovery was. He said, I learnt about it. Of course he learnt about it much later. Why would I tell him? You know, he didn't know anything about Voyager. So he learnt about it a year later, because that's when, somebody told him.
Implying that your calls were not about the losses.
Yeah. So this is the, but when the government knew very well. See, this is the thing that the government, that I have been trying to get across. They will stop at nothing. They will do everything, even twist the truth.
But your lawyers should have stopped at nothing.
No, we are playing by the rules. Here's the thing, there's an asymmetry between what the rules the governments play by.
American lawyers, they get the most guilty people off by not playing by the rules. You know that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't, that's a separate topic.
And you're not playing with the rules.
No,
by the rules.
I'm playing by the rules,
I think you refuse to accept the fact that you had incompetent lawyers.
No, I didn't. I say in my book, my lawyers were not that effective.
Putting it mildly,
Yeah,
because...
but, it's like...
Why did you hire Gary Naftalis? It seems like a kind of thing that happens in India. One, because he was an old associate of the judge. He had worked with him.
No, I didn't even know that. No.
And the judge had officiated at his son's 2009 wedding.
No, here's the thing, Madhu, please, you're an investigative journalist. You need to find out the right sequence of events. Don't put innuendo in. When I'm
not putting
honest.
innuendos, I'm asking you a straight question.
No, but you haven't done the research properly.
It's because I've done the research that this has come up.
You question of it, but it is wrong. When I hired Gary Naftalis, right, which was at the recommendation of Goldman Sachs, he had a great reputation in the market. Rakoff was not my judge. The judge gets appointed 2 years later. So you're implying that I hired him because he was Rakoff's friend.
Which is not a crime.
No, but you're implying that. It's not
I'm
true.
saying that.
No, it's not true, because the judge was appointed 2 years later. I don't know who my judge was going to be. In the American system, you don't know. They allocate a judge after you've been sued. I hired Gary Naftalis 2 years earlier.
You wrote that your frustration with Ravi Trehan grew as you listened to Anil Kumar's lies. Did you ever find out what happened to Ravi Trehan? He never told you to your face that he won't testify for you. He stopped taking your calls and your lawyers' calls. Who got to him and what made him turn his back on you?
It's only speculation, I don't know.
What would that be?
The speculation simply is that, yes, the prosecutors talked to him. And after they talked to him, he stopped being so cooperative. He was very cooperative to begin with. And he had a conversation with my lawyers, which the timeline was exactly what I had told my lawyers, because that was the truth. And then he stopped cooperating.
And you said that in your book that you thought that he had switched loyalties, which means that they had threatened him, that they had something on him?
I cannot I don't know. But obviously either he got scared or they had something on him. I have no idea. It's just a pure speculation. But he certainly,
Ravi Trehan just disappeared from your life, possibly the only person who could have helped your case in this issue, on this issue.
Correct.
On the Voyager
Correct.
issue.
Yeah.
Now, Lloyd Blankfein, I think, lied right through the trial, saying that he didn't remember anything. How could he not recall that Rajaratnam was the client of Goldman? He had also been briefed by the prosecutors, which I believe is illegal, and he only used "I don't remember" when it suited him. Why did your lawyers not expose him on all these issues?
Oh, they tried their very best. They tried their very best. They kept objecting to when he said, his favorite line was that I don't remember whether earnings were discussed or not. And then he would follow it up with saying, but it's my practice to disclose earnings. This was an extraordinary board meeting. There was no discussion of earnings. It was all about firing. So he's leaving that innuendo in the minds of the jury that, generally not generally, it's my practice to discuss earnings. The judge, we objected before he could say that it would be stricken off this thing. The judge ruled against us. And this was carefully rehearsed by the prosecutor to say, this was to go around with, there was no agenda of the board meeting. There was no minutes of the board meeting. It was on a topic that was completely different from earnings. So why would earnings be discussed, right?
But he said it's his practice to discuss earnings. Yeah. So he left it vague. But you did complain about Lloyd Blankfein in another interview, and you said there are so many examples of where what he should have said was, I don't remember, I don't know. Instead, what he kept saying was, it's my practice to discuss earnings. Were you suggesting that he should have obfuscated?
No, if you don't remember, you just say, I don't remember, that's it.
But he said he remembered and said,
he
it's my practice to discuss earnings.
He said, I don't remember, but it's my practice. Which is the clever, twist that the prosecutors rehearsed him on.
But then what you're suggesting to him is that you should just say, I don't remember.
Of course, that's the question. Do you remember the earnings were discussed? No, I don't remember.
But him qualifying it with, it's normally my practice, isn't that an acceptable answer?
No, it is not. Nobody asked you. Nobody asked you, right? You're supposed to answer the direct question. Mm-hmm. Do you remember? No, I don't remember, but it is my practice. That's not, who's asked you that question?
It's almost like you're suggesting to him to dodge it, no?
I'm not suggesting. Either you remember or you don't remember. There was no agenda. See, here's a board meeting that is called for a special reason, which is we have fired 10% of the staff. Mm-hmm. The week before the board meeting, there was another board meeting in which we did discuss earnings. That was for that purpose. A week later, 10% of the staff is fired. That's the extraordinary crisis. It's a crisis board meeting. And the board is mad. Why didn't the management inform us that they were going to fire 10% of the staff? We had a meeting a week earlier. They could have told us if they're thinking about it.
While thinking about what would go in your statement to the judge at the end of the trial, you've written, I could not bring myself to express contrition or apologize for crimes I had not committed, no matter what the verdict said. You wrote that the verdict represented an untruth. On the other hand, you've also admitted to making the mistake, which we discussed earlier, about discussions in the Goldman board meeting, not reacting about Rajaratnam's payments to Anil Kumar, which you say are okay.
You keep coming back to these 2 points. They have no relevance to the case, I'm telling you.
But that's what they got you on, didn't they?
No, not at all.
Okay, but related to McKinsey, giving you the benefit of the doubt, okay, that your intention was not to give a tip and profit from it, but that information about the board, whether it led to trading or not, was given by you, which you've said, you've written that.
Yeah,
no?
I know, but I don't understand, Madhu, why you're harping on it, because it has nothing to do with the charge.
No, there's another question. So what I think people were looking for in your book, in some sense, was some contrition and an apology about what you yourself admit is a mistake.
No, mistake is very different. What contrition for what? Contrition for what?
For discussing what happens in a board.
No, I have to say it was a figure of speech. It was a publicly available information already by then. Okay? In fact, the management said this was discussed at the board. They said it was discussed at the board. Already, before me.
Before you gave testimony?
Before that phone call.
Okay.
There was a month gap or more than a month gap between the board meeting and that call. In intervening month, there was lots of public debate about who should acquire whom, etc., etc. The management of Goldman Sachs gave information to the analysts saying, yes, we are discussing it. This was discussed at the board. This is their statements. I repeated, yes, it was discussed at the board. I feel that's a mistake. But you're blowing it up as if it has, and no, seriously, because you keep coming back to this. It is not to do with the crime. Rajaratnam was never charged on that phone call, never charged on Goldman.
But you were.
No, I know, but that was for a different...
So that's why it's an issue.
It's a different...
This is what the jury heard.
But Madhu, it's a different two calls. It has nothing to do with this call. Okay? And it was not market moving inside information. So, your question, why am I not contrite? I did not commit the crime. Why should I be contrite? There's no reason when I didn't commit the crime, why should I apologize for that? Yes, I've already said I made a mistake by saying it was a board discussion.
So, at the end, when you were going to make your statement to the judge, this was your opportunity to set the record straight and actually tell the judge and jury that they were wrong and give your full argument in your own defense. Why did you hold back? Could you have not used that moment to even
No, I'm sorry. You have not done enough research on.
You keep saying that. I think I've done a lot of research. That does not put me down in any. Viewers, cross that out. Hear it, but cross it out. I've done my research.
I will tell you why you're wrong. That is a hearing for the purposes of sentencing.
Yes.
There is no litigating the case. In fact, if you start litigating the case, they will shut you down.
No, not litigating, but you could have said what you...
No, that's a litigation. If you are trying to prove you're innocent, you just said, if I shouldn't have said the story that said why I'm innocent.
So, at every step where you had the opportunity to at least give your story, for one reason or the other, you didn't.
That is not the place you can give your story. This is a place where you can give a plea to the judge for leniency or consideration for your sentence. It's a sentencing hearing.
And you could have given your story with the plea for leniency. That you weren't really guilty as you saw it.
No, that is explicitly forbidden. This is the research I'm saying you should look at statements done in a sentencing hearing. It has zero to do with proving you're innocent or saying to the judge, please be lenient to me because I'm innocent. Here's the reasons why. If you do that, you'll have the exact opposite effect because that's not the place.
Can you assess, given your position now and then, why do you think McKinsey cut you off?
Why? They were afraid.
Of?
They were afraid that there would be reputational blowback, so they wanted to distance themselves as much as possible. I don't blame them for that. I don't. That's perfectly fine. But,
you said, yes.
But they did do a couple of things that I don't believe they should have done. To say that I'm not an alumni, striking me out of the alumni directory, makes no sense. I spent 37 years there, I led the firm for 9 years. And to say I'm not an alumni, and as if by striking that from the database means that I'm not an alumni. I am an alumni. They can't ever deny that. So that's I would say, below the belt, not worthy of McKinsey and Company's values. Okay.
Are you bitter about that?
No, I've said this, my simple thing is, I owe a great deal to McKinsey. I've always said that. I'm a great fan of McKinsey and Company. But in the particular case, what they did, there were two things. One was that They took these actions when I was just charged. And they should have had the strong value like Bill Gates did when he said to me, you are innocent till you're proven guilty. As far as I'm concerned, you stay on the board. And just let me finish this out.
Sorry.
So McKinsey, when they took these actions, I was only charged, okay? They should have had the feeling of saying he's innocent till he's proven guilty. First point. Second point, as you said in yourself in the beginning, it's a great set of values. One of the values is we are a global partnership. Okay. They believe in partnership values. Partnership means when your partner is going through a tough time, you help them. You don't have to be public about it. You don't have to worry about, you help them. You don't kick them.
You said that you never heard from McKinsey. Yet Ian Davis spoke to you 5 times. And
Money more than 5 times.
all right. And he said that every time you spoke to him, you started the conversation with the same thing that you're saying now, which is, I have done nothing wrong.
That's not correct.
Okay, so
I had that conversation with Ian. I'm telling you that's not correct.
But you must have told him that you've done nothing wrong.
No, I'll tell you exactly what happened, the sequence of it. The first time I heard from Ian after I was charged, he said that the firm is going through a process and you will have, this was after they did all the things they did to me. I said, he called me up and he said that
they started an internal investigation.
And he said that you will have an opportunity to give your version of events, and either myself or Vic Malhotra, who used to run the North America at that time, would give you a call. That call never came. And then they took these actions, as I told you. They took away my secretary, they took me out of the alumni directory and all that. And so I never had due process of McKinsey's committee or board or whoever hearing my side of the story. Ian and I were very good friends, and whenever he visited US Next, he called me up. We never discussed the case. I never brought it up. It was clear to me that he had promised that either he or Vic would call. That call never happened. No due process was followed. They never heard my side of the story. They took whatever action they took. They have to live with that. I never brought it up. I only told Ian. Ian read my book. I sent it to him before actually it was published. And he said, you've accurately represented everything that happened related to McKinsey, and I have no quarrel with it. It's exactly what happened. So yeah. I don't know where you're getting that from, but I never 5 times mentioned to Ian I didn't do anything wrong or anything like that. That was not my...
But it would be in character for you to say you've done nothing wrong?
If he asks me, I don't start off with saying I didn't, no. I mean, Ian and I are very good friends. We talk about all kinds of things.
So there's nothing wrong in your saying I did nothing wrong?
Of course not. I mean, I've said that in the book. I've said, but your characterization, every time I met him for 5 times I said that, is not right.
So I'll tell you what I got, was that when he tried to speak to you about what you'd been charged with or whatever, and they'd started an internal investigation, I could be wrong, I may be wrong, but my source tells me that the internal investigation found that you allegedly had violated code of conduct within McKinsey while you were managing director.
But they should have talked to me about it. Whenever you can reach a conclusion,
yes,
you have to talk to the person who you're talking about.
Yes, and right? They were subpoenaed and they gave all the records.
Of course, that's a legal requirement.
Yeah.
But, you can't, I'm not here to listen to you, just some source of you are telling somebody like that. There was no discussion McKinsey had with me. And I'm not interested in responding to some source you're not prepared to disclose what it is and who said that and what authority.
You said that Preet Bharara went after you because he'd failed to catch the big fish during the financial meltdown. Now, Bharara's written in his book doing justice, that it was his predecessor, Michael Garcia, who had initiated the case, and he simply inherited the whole lot of cases. In fact, there were 66 people charged for insider trading, and all of them either took a plea bargain or were proved guilty. So you were just one of them, according to Preet.
We switched points. You just said, I said to Barara that he didn't go after the big fish. It was his duty to do that. He never did that. Or he was unable to do it.
No.
Hedge fund managers are not big fish of the financial crisis. The big fish of the financial crisis are, banks and housing companies and rating companies.
What would you say the reason was that they didn't go after the Lehman Brothers and all the rest of them?
I have no idea. You have to ask him. Why didn't he go after them? Because it was obvious. I mean, this is the time when America faced a grave crisis. People lost their jobs, people lost their pensions, people, were basically in a situation where they were losing their houses. They were being, there was a massive crisis. And in that, it was very clear who caused the crisis. The housing companies and the banks and the rating companies and so on. And yet, no one from that industry of any consequence was held accountable. They were fined billions of dollars. They admitted wrongdoing, as if institutions magically do wrong things and not people inside them. So Preet Bharara should be asking the question, why couldn't we get anybody who really mattered? There is a book called Chicken Shit Club. You should read it.
Yeah. You mentioned that before in other interviews.
Yeah, you should read.
And, there's been a big response in America about prosecutors crossing their line. And as you know,
it's
Governor
both ways. It's both ways. Excessive, unchecked power by prosecutors, and also looking the other way for real people who they should have got. In both ways. Overplaying it in some areas and underplaying it in some areas.
Was the government involved in protecting them?
I don't know.
You've been through some really tough times in terms of the process of being charged and then going to prison and then coming out. And also you wrote that during these times you get to know your real friends. You wrote in an email. And you also heard, speaking to someone on the phone, I don't know, this is written in a book, that no one is even taking my calls anymore. At least you're taking my calls. And in this book it says what he didn't, and I'm quoting, what he didn't appreciate was that his former colleagues felt betrayed. As bad as his actions were, what was more disappointing was that he showed no contrition.
Who is this?
This is from Anita Raghavan's book, The Billionaire's Apprentice.
Yeah. So what's your question?
My question is that she's mentioning that many of your colleagues and people who worked around you and young Indians in America felt betrayed, that this was our icon who was held up as this wonderful example who came to America, really made the American dream. And then they feel personally let down and would have thought that a kind of bearing of the soul and saying, yes, I did this, and really a book that completely exposed your inner self and what you went through would have maybe had some kind of an answer to.
No, but I think, Anita Raghavan's book wholesale swallowed the story of the prosecutors. Yet she always asks all the while, I can't figure out why he did it. She ends with that.
But even the judge asked, why did he do it?
Yeah, exactly. But maybe the answer to that question is not sort of why he did it, because you're assuming I did it, is that maybe he didn't do it because there was no evidence. It didn't prove. There was no conversation passing. There was no benefit. The government admitted. I have had inside information for 35 years. If I wanted to disclose inside information, I could do it and make a lot of money. I've had inside information for every client. I've done some of the largest mergers in the world. So maybe somebody should be thinking about why is it we can't figure out why he did it? Maybe the question to ask for is, maybe he didn't do it.
Rajat, the jury thought you did. All your appeals have been rejected. Is it possible that the complete judicial system is wrong?
Of course it is possible. The judicial system is not God. It doesn't get it right every time. There are many, many injustices in the US judicial system. I can assure you of that. If anybody says otherwise, they are completely mistaken.
So you still and will always stand by the fact that despite what the judgments have been, your rejection of appeals, you will still stand by the fact that you did nothing that the jury accused you of, or the prosecution accused you of rather. You did nothing wrong, you were incarcerated improperly, and you stand by your innocence.
You're absolutely correct. That's what I would have said.
Right, I would read something from a reviewer, and I would love your reaction about it. This reviewer wrote, Gupta seems unwilling to assess it in any meaningful or honest way. Gupta's book shows an alarming lack of regret, an alacrity for finger-pointing, and a stubborn refusal to take responsibility. He dishes out criticism of others freely and yet doesn't address the severity of his own misstep. What if you had just been a little more honest?
No, you're implying that I was not honest.
No, I'm saying I don't know what the word is, Rajat, but it seems that you have not really gone to the bones of what happened.
I have tried my very best. I've given you a very authentic account of how I felt when I was going through and what I know is the facts. This is the most unusual case in insider trading history. There is no benefit. There is no establishment of criminal intent. They made up a case and they were succeeded. I mean, if anything, I feel even more strongly today than ever before that this was a big injustice. As I wrote the book, I thought about it. And to keep saying, that I should somehow repent or apologize, for what? I've admitted whatever mistakes I made. They do not rise to any insider trading or any criminality.
So, Rajat, what will you do now? How are you going to go forward?
Well, I am back doing some of the things I really enjoyed doing. They were involved in trying to do work in education and public health, and I will add to my agenda to do something about the US criminal justice system. If I can make a contribution in reforming it, I'd try my best.
Rajat, I thank you. I personally do feel that a lot of what happened was based on circumstantial evidence, but I must admit that as far as the McKinsey aspect of Anil Kumar and him being paid by Rajaratnam, I still personally believe that you really should have informed McKinsey.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion. I didn't think it rose to the... I didn't even, as I told you, it didn't even register to me.
But it should have. Your values, McKinsey values, they were ingrained in you.
Madhu, firstly, you keep saying that. A friend paying somebody $1 million. In hindsight, you can think, that was about...
No friend of mine has ever paid me $1 million for anything. No one does.
No, but
there has to be a reason.
But Raj Ratnam is an exaggerator. I wouldn't even necessarily believe if he says that. He used to say all kinds of things. And by the way, that has absolutely nothing to do with the case.
So did you speak to Anil Kumar about it?
No, I never. I did. It just went in my 1 year and went out. Because...
But maybe it should have stayed in.
No, not necessarily. Because this is not my job in terms... I don't even know whether it's true.
But you're an ex-McKinsey director.
But Madhu, realize this. It has zero to do with anything to do with the case.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
I'm talking about Anil Kumar, you, McKinsey.
Yeah, it is not. I think people in McKinsey got annoyed at me for that, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I am telling you, it didn't even register.
Okay, but McKinsey people would say, why didn't it register?
Because they don't know Rajaratnam. They don't know the dialogue between Anil Kumar and Rajaratnam, which used to happen multiple times a month.
But for your own safety, if you had...
Why should... I'm not the keeper. I'm retired from McKinsey. I'm not the person who needs to... Everything I hear about... There's so many rumors I hear in McKinsey, right? I won't go and chase down everything. I don't even know it's true.
But you could have mentioned it. Or you checked with Anil Kumar.
Why would I check that? I mean, that's like... that's between them. Rajaratnam, I don't think he's getting it through that Rajaratnam is an exaggerator.
But you still had an office in McKinsey. Your secretary sat there.
Yes, of course.
So your connections with McKinsey stood at that time.
Yeah.
So it would have been a normal thing for you to go into the office and maybe speak to one of the directors.
Not at all.
Or the
it's
director.
between Rajaratnam and Anil. I didn't know it was true. And in fact, I would have assumed at that time, this is another of Rajaratnam's, flighty statements that he used to make all the time.
So why did you go into business with somebody who you thought so lowly of?
No, it's not lowly. You take it out of the context. This is the language. This is how many hedge fund managers talk and behave.
So what were you doing with them?
And by the way, yes, I also admit that it's not a person I should have gone in business with. It's obvious. It's very obvious from what he did to me. Forget about what his relationship with Anil is.
Mm-hmm. So would you say you're a poor judge of character?
I am, obviously in this case, yes. Generally, I am trusting of everybody. And if that means I'm a poor judge of character, probably because I trust everybody.
But in McKinsey, when you interview people for the job, when you hire people, I believe it's one of the most intense and really pulling people apart before you hire them.
Yeah.
So you judge character there.
Yeah, and I do a good job, and I generally do a good job. I mean, I'm a bad judge of character because I devoted a lot of time working with Bill Gates on malaria. Did I judge him wrong? There hundreds of people I dealt with.
But you went into business with Rajaratnam.
And then there are lots of people I went with business with. I invested with lots of people.
Well, the other one that went wrong was in the Tamil Nadu Bank, the Mercantile Bank.
I think, let's close this interview because you're going in a direction that, to me, doesn't, Yes, did I make a bad judgment in terms of Rajaratnam as a partner? Yes.
So, thank you very much, Rajat. I think the areas that you are uneasy about, I think it really is meaningful to viewers because people who read your book and people who know you and have seen other interviews, questions come up, which I think is an opportunity for you to clarify.
I tried my best to clarify it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.